Total Warfare here with a guide to the Suebi faction in Total War Rome 2. The Suebi are one of the most interesting barbarian factions. Not the strongest, but full of unique mechanics that reward smart play. However, their tricky starting position and unit roster hide some player traps that can cripple your campaign if you're not prepared. In this guide, I'll show you how to navigate their early game, what to conquer first, the best units and army composition for every stage of the campaign, and how to manage the Suebi economy and tech tree. This guide is based on what I learned in my legendary difficulty This is Total War campaign, but the strategies will work on any difficulty. Let's get started. Now, starting with faction traits. Terror of the Night can always choose to fight night battles. This is the single most powerful faction trait in all Rome 2. Basically, it allows you to split enemy forces. Whenever you're facing 2 or 3 stacks, you can fight one of them at a time. And you get this as a passive for every single general and admiral. This is extremely powerful. Normally, you need tier 4 cannon commander to get this, so you'd only get it later in the game for maybe 1 or 2 generals. With this, you get this from turn 1 for everyone. Absolutely amazing. Warrior Society is whatever, it gives a little bit of public order but nothing spectacular. Plus 20% morale for all units during battles against barbarian tribes. This is very useful as you are in the sea of barbarians early on, so this will give you a slight boost against other factions. And 100% income from raiding and sacking is also very nice. You'll often repeatedly sack enemy cities, and doubling money from that is extremely powerful. Alright, so this is your starting position. You start with 2 significant armies, although made of fairly crappy units, and look for them, which is the capital of Suebia, one of the absolutely best barbarian provinces in the game. The only province in the northern part of the map with 4 settlements, other than Britannia, and it's actually a really good one. You have Rugion, which is a timber settlement, extremely good resource for barbarians as it's necessary to unlock tier 4 barracks with elite infantry. Alabu and Askokalis are both amber settlements, which offer you really good income and boost to trade income, and both Rugion and Alabu are also portal settlements, offering easy access to food from seaports. So overall, really good province, easily able of making several thousand gold in mid-game. However, there is a player trap right here. You start at war with Boai, who are a faction over here south of you, holding the whole province of Hercynia. If you send a spy here, you'll see that they have an undefended capital with 7 units inside, but there's an army behind it with another 6 units. So, your main guy, Klodokar, can reach Casurgis on turn 1, and it will be very tempting to do so. If you go for it, you can fight night battle and exclude that other army from participating. Then you can also bring the second army, and suddenly you're massively favored. You can even auto-resolve it with relatively insignificant losses of 25%, and you will be tempted to do that. But this is a trap. There are a few reasons for that. First of all, Boai are of Celtic culture. Public order here will be absolutely horrible. The province will continuously rebel, and you will need to face rebels as well as Boai, who will still have very rich settlement here, Istros with a gold mine, so they will still be rich enough to field 1.5, maybe 2 stacks, and they'll be constantly sending that at you. And you will be bordering other Celtic factions that will be really annoyed at you for fighting Boai, and Marcomanni over here are only a short walk away from stabbing you in the back. So it's a absolute trap. This settlement is not rich enough to take it, and you'll be, look, it only has the main building, and you'll be forever bogged down fighting rebels, Boai and other factions throughout the early game. This actually pulls you away from the absolutely most important objective in early game Rome 2, which is uniting your starting province. Look, your starting province is one of the best in the game, and certainly the best in the northern part of the map. You should absolutely focus on taking hold of this first. If you go for Boai, you can fully expect these guys, who are of your culture, to backstab you fairly quickly and attack your capital instead. So you need to take them out first, and you need to do it fast. This is a very brutal part of the map. You can trust no one, and the sooner you take them out, the better. So if you're not attacking Boai early game, who are we attacking? Well, there are 2 options, either Askokalis or Rugion, or both. And this is what I actually advise for experienced players who are comfortable fighting against the odds. What you can do is double time both your armies here and set up attacks on Askokalis and Rugion on turn 2. This is a strong move because both these factions start with only a small army of 4 units, and you start with 10 here and 7 here, 17 units. You can split them 8 and 9. This means you can safely double time into their territory, and they won't be able to take you out because they can only attack with 4, as long as you stay out with cities reinforcement rate. However, especially Rugion is tricky as they also have small fleets helping them from the port. But if you're comfortable with that, you can absolutely take both on turn 2, and this will put you in a very strong strategic position in your starting province. If you want to see how these battles play out and how exactly to do that, check out the episode 1 of my This is Total War Suebi campaign, where I go through them in detail and actually play them. If you rather take it slightly slower, then the best course of action is to combine both armies, move your king out, transfer the units over to him, double time here, just next to the border, and attack with full force into Askaukalis on turn 2. They will only have like 5 units inside and 4 units of garrison, so you can easily beat them with 16 you start with, and the other guy can start recruiting second stack. After you take Askaukalis, I always recommend building this Artisan's Lodging in every single settlement you have, because this building not only gives you 50 gold, but also gives you absolutely massive 6 unit garrison. This is extremely strong. Now, after you take Askaukalis with your single army, you need to move quickly against Rugion. So double time here, bring the other 4 units you recruit to create a full stack, and they take Rugion on turn 4. You will still need to fight a manual battle, and they will have hired some more troops by then, but it's entirely doable. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can bring a second general with no troops and just hire some mercs right before the attack. Now, in the meantime though, we need to do something with Boai, because they will not be sitting on their hands while you're conquering Suabia. They will come at Lupfurdum soon enough. So, the best way to deal with them is to move your general right here and fortify. This way, you're blocking the whole width of the passage here. They can't go around you. I recommend to have at least 4 of these crappy units, club levies, or maybe 3 of them and 1 spear brother who is better at holding the gate. And this is actually enough to beat full stack of Boai, simply because you are getting reinforced by 14 units from the garrison. And they will spawn behind them and to the side, which means you can automatically flank them. Just make sure you keep enough inside the fort to hold the gate, and if you're not sure how to defend the fort, I have a guide on that on the channel, so make sure to check it out too. Now, this setup with 5 or 6 units in the fort supported by the Lupfurdum garrison is enough to hold Boai off for quite a long time, which gives you enough time to actually go for Alabu after you take Rugion. But for that you need either more than 1 stack, or a really good stack, or a stack and a fleet, because these guys are quite rich and they'll be sitting on 1 and a bit stacks plus the garrison. After that you should absolutely take Boai out, because by then they will be quite strong. Once they build level 1 barracks, they can recruit Celtic warriors, which are way better than your early game units, so you shouldn't give them too long. And I don't recommend going west, focus on going east first to reach natural borders of the map. Mons Regius gives you another coastal settlement with fishing port, and it's a big settlement with massive geographical borders. You will see enemies coming from miles away. Next you should also focus on Silesia, with 2 decent settlements that are of Germanic culture, so you will not have any issue maintaining public order here. With this strong base you can push either west or south. Okay, next the tech tree. Now, the absolutely most important tech for early game is emergency measures. You need 4 turns to get that, but it gives you access to Woodworker, Longbow Hunters and Germanic Ballista, 2 very good ranged units that will serve you the whole game. However, once you have this, you should go for Headhunt. This unlocks tier 3 barracks, Bronze Forge, as well as Proving Grounds. Make sure to build Proving Grounds in your capital. This building makes your melee infantry much stronger. I'm not a big fan of the other 2, Meeting Hall and Jeweler, because morale and charge bonus are not as useful, but this is absolutely the strongest unit boosting building in the game, so make sure you build tier 3 of this as soon as possible, and only recruit in the province where you have this stuff built in. Now, Headhunt also unlocks Bronze Forge, so make sure to build them fairly quickly. They unlock a couple of interesting units, Bloodsworn and Round Shield Swordsman. And more importantly, at tier 3 they also unlock this bad boy, Spearwall. After you get these early game military techs, you should go for Dignitaries and Trumpet Maker. Trumpet Maker is a good building, gives you both public order and money. Infantry Chainmail is obviously very strong as it unlocks Swordmasters, but don't go for this too quickly, as you'll need really good economy to be able to hire and maintain these guys, as the upkeep on them is whooping 200 gold per turn. However, you could go for Advanced Saddle, as it gives you stables. Your early game cavalry from Horsebands is pretty crappy. Riders of the Hunt are slightly better, so it's a significant upgrade on these guys, even though they are not that strong. Now, one way to build your economy is to get Raised Side, which allows you to build 100 tier 3 main building. The only good reason to go for this is that it's so easily available, and you should not have food issues. This requires 4 food, but with 3 ports from Rugion, Alabu and Mons Regius, you'll have enough food to actually be able to build them, and you should also fairly quickly in the game have multiple provincial capitals, at the very least these 3. So going for upgrades on them is actually quite useful and will pay off. I also recommend grabbing this, because level 3 farm gives you 10 food. You might need this sooner or later, and it's also always good to get to 25 food to reach maximum bonus to growth and replenishment for your units faction-wide. One other building worth mentioning is Holy Tree. We should always upgrade in your main province to growth of wooden nuts. This one is actually absolutely insane. It gives 4 public order, 4 Germanic cultural influence and 6% to income, but more importantly, it unlocks these bad boys, wooden nut spears. They're really good. Now let's talk about units. Your 3 tier 0 units are club levies, spear levies and Germanic youths. Let's talk about club levies first. These guys look like absolute trash at first glance, but it's actually one of my favorite Suebi units. They have 4 things going for them. They are very cheap, only 200 gold to hire. They are also very cheap in upkeep. They have precursor javelins. Also, they have very nice bonus versus infantry of 10. Now early game, not many units have better stats than this. The only weakness of this guy is very horrible morale. Then we have spear levy. This guy is significantly more expensive. It costs 86 in upkeep. It has slightly better stats than club levy, but not significantly so. The main difference is 20 more melee defense. However, in my opinion, it's not worth the extra cost of over 30 gold per turn. Yes, they will hold the line slightly better, but they are still crappy early game unit with poor morale and poor defensive stats overall. So I would rather get more club levies. And then we have Germanic youths. I don't normally recommend javelin units, especially the ones that don't also double as melee infantry, such as peltasts, but this guy is actually decent in this particular context. The reason is, early game, barbarians have very little defenses. If you hover over this, you can see 30 armor comes from shield and only 10 is the actual armor on the guy. Which means, if you flank units like this with your Germanic youths and shoot your javelins in their backs, you'll absolutely obliterate them, because not only javelins deal 32 damage, of which 12 is armor piercing, you're hitting enemy with only 10 armor. I actually quite like these guys in this particular context in early game, but only during the first several turns until you get your archers and ballistas. Once you have archers, they massively outdamage Germanic youths, and they have more ammunition as well. They also cost 86 in upkeep, which is actually quite a lot for a basic unit. Now, Artisan's Lodging unlocks Spear Brothers. These are actually pretty decent early game units. They are significantly better than Spear Levies. Just look at them. Every single stat is higher. They are massively better, and they only cost about 20 more in up. Another reason not to ever get Spear Levies, because Spear Brothers are so much better and only slightly more expensive. Next tier 1 unit is Germanic Slingers, unlocked by Craftsman's House, which you'll need to build on the way to Woodworker to get your Longbow Hunters and Ballistas. Now, I don't recommend this unit, it's absolute trash. All Slingers in the game are bad unless they deal more than 20 damage, and especially bad in Barbarian versus Barbarian fights, where no one has much of an armor and the units die like flies. To get real value from Slingers, you need a long battle where they can use most or ideally all of their ammunition, but in early game Barbarian fights, it's just not going to happen. The battles will be quick and bloody. Instead, wait to build Woodworker and get these amazing hunters. Like, they are not really amazing, they are basically a typical early game archer with +5 missile damage, but this is twice what Slingers deal for only 20 more in upkeep. I absolutely recommend having these guys, and this is the best ranged unit for Suebi anyway, so you will use them throughout the game. Of course, Ballista is one of the best units in the game, so you always want at least 1 or 2 in every stack you build. Next, once you build Bronze Workshop, you'll get access to Round Shield Swords and Bloodsworn. Now, let's start with Round Shield Swords. They are actually half decent unit, but for tier 1. For tier 2, they are below average. They are roughly the same power level as Hastati or Celtic Warriors, which are both tier 1. And they are just a step up from club levies. They cost twice as much in upkeep, having the same armor and melee defense, but they do get better melee attack and weapon damage. Although when fighting infantry, it's actually pretty close with club levies bonus versus infantry. They do have better morale though, so they will hold the line a little bit longer, but I don't recommend them as your frontline unit. You should use a spear unit instead, because these guys just don't have enough melee defense to hold the line for longer. Instead, use them on flanks. They are still decent against cavalry because of precursor javelins, and then you can flank enemy line and rear charge them. The second tier 2 unit is Bloodsworn, and this is absolute trash. Never hire this unit, it's a scam. At first glance it looks pretty good with 38 melee attack and 49 melee defense, and very nice bonus versus infantry of 10. However, this unit has only 20 armor. Right off the bat it means it gets obliterated by ranged units, and it gets absolutely crushed by any sort of cavalry charge, because it not only has very poor armor but also is a light unit, which means it takes massive damage from impact on charge. So right off the bat it loses to 2 out of 3 unit types, to ranged and cavalry. So you would think it needs to be really good against infantry to justify the downsides. Well, it's not. 1v1 it badly loses to even Celtic warriors, which are tier 1 units, despite having bonus versus infantry. It's just not a good unit. It even loses against units it's designed to beat. You might say, well, you should use this on flanks to flank the enemy and rear charge them. Well, you can do this just as well with round shield swords, who are better in every other scenario too. Never hire them, they are absolute crap. For the same upkeep you can get 2 club levies, which are better in auto resolve and also better in manual resolve, because there's simply more of them. Now, once you advance to Bronze Forge, you get access to Spear Wall, and this unit is really interesting. It's a massive upgrade from Spear Brother, but only defensively. It gets massive boost to melee defense, morale and health, but it has the same attack and weapon damage as a tier 1 unit, which means as much as it's really good defensively, it will not get many kills. What is more, 81 melee defense is absolute overkill, especially that when you hire it, it will have more like 95 or even 100 thanks to Proving Grounds in your capital. So this unit is simply unbalanced. It would be much stronger if it had less melee defense, but more either attack or armor. But as it is, it's still a decent defensive unit. It's good enough to hold the line for a really long time, allowing you to use your swords and cavalry on flanks to get behind enemy lines, destroy their shooters and rear charge the line which spear walls have pinned. And finally, Bronze Furnace allows you to hire swordmasters. Now these guys are average. They are like Oathsworn, just slightly worse in every single stat other than health. But 5 health is not making up for the other downsides. They are still the best you can get as Suebi, they are just average. I still recommend replacing all other melee infantry with these guys once you have access to it. Next, let's talk about wooden spears. This unit, unlocked from tier 2 Grove of Woodenass, as a strong alternative to Spear Wall. It's better offensively but worse defensively. It has less armor, less melee defense, but more melee attack and more weapon damage. You can either use this instead of Spear Wall as your frontline unit, although it will not hold the line as well, or you can use this as alternative to round shield swords on flanks, as it has only slightly less melee attack but very respectable defensive stats. I generally prefer Spear Wall, but it's up to you which one you choose. These guys are also really good and you can get them faster. And now Cavalry. Unfortunately, similarly to your melee units, Cavalry in Suebi not very strong either. At tier 2 Horsepants you get Germanic Scout Riders. Now I'm not a big fan of Horse Skirmishers because they require a lot of micromanagement and they are not very useful after they use their javelins, but these guys have serviceable melee stats, so they are still quite useful after you use the javelins, and they should be able to deal with enemy skirmishers, although they will take casualties because of their low melee defense and armor. Especially armor of 30 makes them very vulnerable to any sort of heavier unit or even round of precursor javelin. So I don't recommend these guys. Never hire them for auto-resolve stacks because they'll just get obliterated. Cavalry takes disproportionate losses, and especially units with low defense stats get absolutely destroyed in auto-resolve. For manual resolve, until you get something better, maybe get 2 per stack, you still need some of them to flank the enemy and deal with their shooters. At tier 3 you get stables, which allow Riders of the Hunt. Now these guys again are not spectacular. For tier 3 unit they are massively worse than Heavy Horse or Mighty Horse, but they are serviceable. At tier 4 Horse Ranch unlocks Noble Riders. Now these guys are finally quite decent. They are still, similarly to Swordmasters, slightly weaker than alternative for Celtic faction, Noble Horse, but they are perfectly fine to use as your heavy cavalry on flanks. They will be enough to deal with non-elite enemy cavalry, and also they'll easily run down any enemy skirmishers, and they are more than capable of routing enemy units when rear charging them. So once you unlock these guys, I recommend somewhere between 2 and 4 for every manual resolve stack. Now there's one more unit worth mentioning, Berserkers. They are your typical shock infantry, very good at rear charging and destroying enemy if deployed on flanks and if you can get them behind enemy lines, but they are very difficult to get. You actually need to get the very last tech from War Exercises tree, so this is very much a very late game unit, comes down even after Swordmasters, and I actually don't recommend them over Swordmasters because they have very poor defensive stats. With only 10 armor, they again get obliterated by any sort of precursor javelins or concentrated fire from even slingers. But if you can connect them to the rear of enemy line or blob, they will get absolutely massive kill count. So typical high risk, high reward unit. I personally prefer Swordmasters. Now let's talk about army composition. For early game, you want to prioritize cheap units because the jump in power from Club Levy to even Spear Brothers isn't that big. However, if you fight your battles manually, you can go with a front line of 6 Spear Brothers, 2 or 3 Germanic youths to use on flanks and against enemy cavalry and also against enemy general, and the rest can just be Club Levies because they are so cheap. For mid game, once you have access to tier 2 units, get either 1 ballista and 4 archers or 2 ballistas and 3 archers, 2 scout riders to use on flanks and run down enemy skirmishers, and for your 12 main infantry units, use half of Spear Brothers and half of Round Shield Swordsmen, Spear Brothers making the front line and 3 swords on each flank. And once you unlock tier 3 units, simply replace Spear Brothers with Spear Wall. If you build Shrine of Woodanas and have access to Woodanas spears, you can either use Woodanas spears instead of Spear Wall, or also use them instead of Round Shield Swords, because they are also much better defensively than Swordsmen, in which case you would just go with 12 Woodanas spears. And once you unlock Elite Cavalry and Swordmasters, you can actually go heavier on cavalry with maybe even 4 Noble Riders and 10 Swordmasters. Once you have Swordmasters, you don't need any other melee infantry, so just replace all the crappy swords and spears with these guys. Also, once you have access to Noble Riders, you don't need a Noble Rider General. You should just get another Swordmaster because it takes fewer casualties in auto-resolve and you already have strong cavalry. In terms of economy, this is around turn 60, and you can see Suebi produces almost 6,000 gold despite being fully military province. And yet, 6k income is very respectable. It's not also fully developed. There's enough space for 3 more buildings, and if you build double coin hoard for 400 gold each and another money building, you can easily crack 8,000 with here, with doubling your income through taxes. Here's my recommended blueprint for this province. You absolutely need barracks, and the best place to build that is in Askaukalis, because it's the most vulnerable to attack from Mons Regis and from Budorgis. For ports, you should upgrade them to fishing ports, as you will need food, and there are no good alternatives for barbarian factions anyway. And make sure to also build horse ranch and woodworker. And also, you should always build proving grounds in the capital, because it insanely boosts your melee infantry. And then, however many public order buildings you need to get maximum taxes with no negative impact on public order. In this case, we have 3 here: double trumpet maker and 1 shrine of Woodanas. For all other non-recruitment provinces, I recommend spamming coin mints. They're really powerful. 200 gold for -2 food is a very good deal, especially that this 200 gold gets doubled from taxes. So you're really looking at 400 gold income from this at the very least. So get as many of them as you can, ideally 1 in every settlement, and make sure to get enough food and public order to be able to maintain maximum taxes. Alright, subscribe.